Hello, my name is Michael Burke, and I want to talk to you today about the budget that's just been announced by Jeremy Hunt. It's obviously a pre-election budget, and the flagship policy was the cut in national insurance rates. And no doubt Hunt and the Tories will want people to focus on that. I want to look behind, though, that flagship policy and to see what's actually really going on with the economy and with what the Tories are doing and what the alternative is. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to share a screen with you now. It's very short. It's a very short slideshow, but I want to be able to get behind what's going on and behind the headlines that both Hunt will want, but also behind some of the sort of short-termist and superficial commentary that we're likely to get from some of our media. And the first thing to say is that it's another austerity budget. It won't break out of the economic crisis we're in, and misery will grow and public services will deteriorate. And unfortunately, I think all those things are true arising from what he's done today and what's been done in the past. The first thing to say is that Hunt said in his speech that he wanted to be judged on the measure of GDP per head. Fine, that's good. It's only important for most people in terms of how they understand GDP if it means they're getting better or worse off. And the way we know that on average, and it's only an average, is GDP per head. Unfortunately, what has been happening is GDP per head has been falling, and it's been falling significantly even since we came out of lockdown. And as the chart here shows, what we have is a situation where we're almost back to the level of GDP on this measure we were before the great financial crisis began in 2008. So effectively, 16 lost years under these policies. I emphasize that because there's nothing radical or different about what Hunt's done today compared to what he did previously and compared to what his predecessors did previously. So the idea that we can expect some radical change and certainly any radical improvement in living standards is for the birds. It's just not going to happen because all that's really happening is repeating the same old policies. They take a different form and there's nuance and emphasis, but expecting a different outcome from the same experiment is Einstein's definition of madness. And we shouldn't expect that, and we shouldn't expect any radical improvement. One further thing to say about this is, of course, these are averages. And what's really been happening in the economy is there's been a huge growth of inequality because austerity isn't simply cuts, which I'll come on to. That's my next point, really, that austerity isn't just cuts, it's the transfer of incomes and wealth from poor to the rich and from workers to big business. So I can recall the very first austerity budget that Osborne and Cameron brought in was the main parts of it were two components. One was a big increase in VAT rates, which the Treasury reckoned would net 13 billion. And that, of course, is paid mostly by ordinary people. And secondly, there's a 13 billion tax giveaway to big business and the rich. So it's not all cuts. It's a transfer. That 13 billion taken out of the pockets of people on ordinary pay and low pay in the main, and given to big business and the rich. And that's been the defining feature of austerity ever since it was introduced. And that's why we have a situation where the level of inequality is soaring. So the Citizens Advice Bureau brought out a report very recently saying that 5 million people in this country have what they describe as negative wealth. That means they live from day to day, and actually their income is lower than their needed expenditure. They also said there were over 2 million who were, to avoid dropping into that situation, just simply did without essentials. Um, so it's not the case that we're all in it together. We've seen high street banks, we've seen major supermarkets, we've seen, of course, the energy companies and others, really large businesses do really, really well out of the last period, whereas millions, if not tens of millions of people are facing declining living standards and in some cases outright misery, even the growth of destitution in this country. So the averages conceal a lot. And today's budget is no different in that regard. The big flagship policy that Hunt and the Tories will want to tout and shout from the rooftops is actually a benefit mainly to people on about 50,000 plus, um, which is getting close to double the average wage in this country. And of course, many people are unwaged or on very low wages. Um, it's essentially, it's a core vote strategy from the Tories to bolster their own prospects at the election. Not, I think, the prospects of winning, but to holding on to some of their votes. But the beneficiaries are not ordinary people. There's also in the budget and autumn statement of 2023 a huge tax giveaway, an 11 billion tax giveaway for investment by big firms. But what the OBR, that's the Office for Budget Responsibility, forecasts today is that business investment is going to decline this year, this fiscal year coming, because all that happened from that 11 billion giveaway was that businesses brought forward the investment they were going to make anyway. And the very small rises in business investment going forward after the big drop this year barely cover that fall. So essentially, it's an 11 billion giveaway for no impact whatsoever, no benefit to the economy. It's just a giveaway. And lots of this, in terms of the national insurance cuts, in terms of big business handouts, are being paid for not by measures announced today, but measures announced by Hunt last year in his two what are called fiscal events, the budget and the autumn statement, 19 billion in cuts to public services. And we see what the disastrous effect of what was imposed already. You know, we have waiting lists in the NHS over 7 million. We have councils like Birmingham and many others across the country going bust. And people can experience the deterioration in public services day to day as they go about their daily business. We know, we feel that things are getting worse, not better. And that too is austerity. Hunt says that investment is the key to growth and to productivity. He's actually correct in that. His policies, however, don't lead to an improvement in business investment. As we've seen, he gave a huge, big tax giveaway to businesses in order to try and boost it. No effect whatsoever. We shouldn't be surprised by that. Ever since the days of Thatcher, Tory governments and others have been cutting business taxes in the hope of boosting public investment, or business investment, I should say. And to no avail. It hasn't worked. And there's a reason it hasn't worked. And it's entirely neglected in terms of the official and other discussion about the economy. And that's to say that the public sector itself has cut its own investment. And given that the public sector is the single biggest actor in the whole economy, and determines what many others do in the private sector, both individuals and businesses, that if the public sector cuts its investment, and it's cutting it again, as these OBR forecasts show, that's going to have a negative impact on business investment, irrespective of the rate of taxation. And that's what's happening. Really interestingly, and possibly quite inadvertently, Hunt did point to what the alternative should be. He's not going to enact it, of course, because there's a complete hostility in official circles in his country to increasing public sector investment because they think that that deprives the private sector of a profit opportunity. So he's not going to do it. But he did point to one thing, which was a 3.4 billion increase in investment in the NHS on IT and similar technical infrastructure. And he said that the return on that is going to be 35 billion. I believe him um, because the returns on investment like that are very, very large indeed. But that is not confined to the NHS and it's not confined to IT in the NHS. The same type of economic logic and laws apply to many other types of investment. They vary in terms of size, but it's true in transport, in infrastructure, in housing, in R&D, even where the government itself is still a direct investor in manufacturing. All of those benefit hugely from public investment. The public sector finances improve, sustainable growth improves, public services improve, and actually, there's an encouragement to business investment. Now, Hunt has no intention of doing that across the whole of the economy, but that does point to what the alternative could be. And of course, for public services, for day-to-day spending, that is not investment. There's a simple way out of the current crisis in our public services, and that's to pay uh, the the services what they need and tax the people who have the money, and that's big business and the rich. Instead of which, we've had an entire thrust in the opposite direction of big business and the rich paying less taxes. And even in times of crisis, the first priority of Hunt and others is to cut their taxes again, business, big business and the rich. And that's the opposite of what's needed. We shouldn't be clobbering ordinary people or even people with moderately high salaries with further taxes. We should, in the famous phrases of the American bank robbers, we should go after where the money is. And that's the people who have the money are big business and the rich. And that's who we should go after in terms of taxes in order to fund public services. It's the crisis of investment that leads to stagnation, and that isn't going to change under these policies. It should be said as well that for the Labour leadership, there's a lesson here, because if you accept all the Tory tax policies and you refuse to have any of your own, you refuse to get the rich and big business to pay for better public services, the inevitable consequence of that is that you're going to have to make cuts very similar to those that the Tories are making. Well, I hope that update was useful. Thanks very much.